Such a humble beginning. His arrival wasn't announced to kings. It wasn't made before large crowds. Jesus' birth was revealed to men protecting sheep. And yet, could this have been any more fitting for a man who would become the greatest shepherd in the world?
We're here in Israel. It's episode 1. We're trying to focus on the birth and the infancy of Jesus. So what are some of the things that we're going to try to go see and visit today?
Well, the first thing we're going to go see is down in Bethlehem. This is where the traditional location of where Jesus was born. Of course, we know he was born in the city, but there's a number of different ideas about exactly where. But we're going to go to one particular place called the Church of the Nativity.
Okay, so we know from the Gospels that during a Roman census, Joseph and Mary come down, and when they get down to Bethlehem, there's no room for them in what the English version says is an inn. We have some images in our imagination that we conjure up when we picture an inn.
The word in the book of Luke is the word kataluma, which literally means a guest room. So when they arrived in Bethlehem, there was no room in the guest room.
Okay.
Which makes sense because there were a number of families there who have come for the census.
That's going to be an interesting sight. You know, we're crossing a border there to go into Bethlehem.
Even though Jerusalem and Bethlehem are only 6 miles apart, there is a security barrier there between Israel and the West Bank.
Now, Luke, the historian of the Gospels, records that in those days a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This was the first registration when Quirinius was governor of Syria, and all went to be registered, each to his own town. And Joseph also went up from Galilee, from the town of Nazareth to Judea, to the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house and lineage of David, to be registered with Mary his betrothed, who was with child. Now, the text talks about Mary and Joseph going up, even though they're heading south. Could you explain that?
The idea here in the scriptures is that you're rising in elevation. The city of Nazareth sits in the Galilean hills, and from the Jezreel Valley, which is fairly close to sea level, you will rise nearly 3,000 feet coming to Jerusalem.
Now, we really want to go see the first century steps at the southern wall of the Temple Mount. There's some significance there to the birth and the infancy of Jesus.
There is. After Jesus was born, his family, being a good Jewish family, went to Jerusalem to have him dedicated at the temple, and they would have gone up those first century steps that we will visit.
All right, so there's some significant events that take place in the life of Jesus, just even at 40 days old.
Bethlehem is only 6 miles to our south. It sits in the West Bank, and so we'll need to travel down there to see all this.
I had no idea Bethlehem was that close to Jerusalem. I'm really excited to go see the Church of the Nativity. When we got to the Church of the Nativity, Barry explained the different sized doors and the humility gate, or the humility door. You have to bow to get underneath it.
What we're looking at here is a statue of Jerome, who translated the Latin version of the Vulgate.
Barry, these arches are incredible.
They are. They're really pretty.
I'm really glad you brought me here.
Oh, this is one of the places I really love to come. But as pretty as this church is, there's something underneath the ground that I think you'll be interested in. Well, one of the things I appreciate about traveling around Israel is because it helps me to make the Bible stories even more real.
Barry, in Matthew chapter 2, Matthew records that after the birth of Jesus, Herod is trying to get him. He's threatened by this king that's going to take his kingdom. And so in a dream, Joseph is told to take Mary, take Jesus, and flee to Egypt. They do that. Herod is frustrated that he missed his opportunity. And so in Matthew 2:16, when he saw that he had been tricked by the wise men, he became furious and sent and killed all the male children in Bethlehem and in all that region who were 2 years old or under, according to the time that he had ascertained from the wise men. Now, that verse is connected to what we're standing next to.
It is. What they found in here are a number of burial chambers and ossuaries in which small children, very young children, were buried. There's some first century tombs down there that they think this is where a number of the babies that during the first century were buried. And this possibly relates to the story in Matthew's 2nd chapter that we read about.
Now, when my mind goes to that event and I read through the Gospels, I think of a larger city. I think of hundreds of children, thousands of children that would fit that criteria. But that's really not what's going on here, is it?
No, it's not. In fact, Bethlehem of modern day is around 60 to 70,000 people. Bethlehem in the first century would have just been several hundred. And so when we think about all the children who were killed, it wasn't in the hundreds or thousands. It was really probably in the number of dozens. Of course, any death is one too many.
To think about what Herod did because he thought Jesus was a competitor to his throne is just, it's horrifying. It's such a haunting reminder of such a terrible time. And all of that was an attempt to get at Jesus as an infant.
It was very sobering. It's very sobering to think about. Down in this cave, they found the remains of children that Herod massacred trying to kill Jesus as an infant. And to think that that was the way things worked, I mean, Herod the Great ended up killing some of his own children, one of his own wives, so it wasn't unprecedented for him. But that's not something that civilized people do. That's not something that's a part of our culture. And so it was sobering. It really established the reality of the event. This isn't something that was imagined. It wasn't something that was made up. You know, with fairy tales and everything else, you want to dress things up and get rid of the ugly parts. And the Gospels don't do that. The Gospels say, this is what happened, even if it's not pleasant, even if you wish it hadn't. And that was one of those moments. Up at the front, there are 3 different religious groups, 3 different churches that maintain the main portion of the church. There was one group that came in and they were praying and doing their morning mass, and then another group came in and they were supposed to clean up, and then another group came in and went down and prayed inside of the cave. So to watch multiple groups maintain the same space was really, I mean, it was different. That's not anything I've ever seen. Barry was able to take us to the cave where the traditional location of Jesus' birth was, and the traditional location of where the stone manger was found that he was laid in. When we use the phrase a traditional location, we mean that this location has a rich heritage going back millennia in some instances to identify a general location.
A lot of the times that means we have a history of people passing down that information from generation to generation.
We may not know the exact rock or piece of dirt, but it's fairly confident to say it's in this general area that this event took place. And we should probably add that God never meant for us to worship a piece of ground. He never meant for us to worship a specific site. What was important for him was what happened at those places.
All right, Jeremy, this is what I wanted to show you. We're down in a cave underneath the Church of the Nativity here in Bethlehem. This is the traditional location of where Jesus Christ was born. The 14 points around the star represent the generations from Abraham to David, David to the exile, and the exile to Jesus.
And those 14 generations, those are captured for us in Matthew chapter 1.
That's right.
And all day long, people are going to be coming down here. They're going to be touching it. They're going to be kissing it. They're going to be leaving prayers down in this little alcove. Now, this marks that spot, but there's something else down here we want to see.
Yes, on the other side of the cave here, there is a little alcove in which they believe the manger sat.
Let's go look at that.
Okay.
Barry, we're only about 12 feet away from that 14-pointed star. What is it that we're looking at?
Well, we read in the Bible that after Jesus was born, that they laid him in a manger. As you can see here, we're underneath this little cave, this little alcove in the cave here. This is the traditional location of where that manger laid.
This was a fantastic honor to be able to come down here.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the misconceptions that most Westerners have ties back to the idea of Jesus was born in a barn. There was no room in the hotel, so they went to the stables and he was placed in a wooden trough, and just that whole picture. And understanding the cultural difference, no, there was no room in the family guest house, so they went to this cave where the animals were kept for privacy and seclusion and placed in a stone manger after he was born. I think corrects a lot of cultural misunderstandings. It's hard to imagine what that must have looked like because so much structure has been built on top of it. It's not natural rock. They've been burning incense down there for millennia. They have pictures of Mary and Jesus as an infant all over the walls. You have all kinds of decorations, and it's just, it's hard to imagine. But one of the things that did help was it communicated the idea of going into a cave. You take these steps down and around a curve, and so you have the sense of you're going underground. You think about the Son of God coming down to earth and being born in the back of a cave with animals in the seclusion and privacy of the hills of Bethlehem, without any trumpeting, without any fanfare, without any attendance other than his parents. And to think about how humble his beginning was. And that was intentional. He was willing to choose that, and to get a better visual of that drives that point home even more strongly.